Today I wanted to talk about how I, let's say, liberated my spirituality. But in order to explain the journey that I have been on over the past number of years, it's important to explain where I began. So I was raised in a Christian family, but not like ultra-religious Christian family. And since I was really small, I had deep interests in things like crystals and reincarnation and energy healing. And, I could sense spirit around me, and it was normal in my world for people to have those kinds of experiences. I was raised in a really open-minded family, and it was something that struck me as natural, that we can communicate with spirit and spirit can communicate with us. Some people can see it, some people can hear it. I had clair olfactory experiences where you could smell spirit sometimes. And so I had been kind of intimidated by that part of myself, because being raised in a Christian framework, a lot of these kinds of things were discouraged. And it's like, it was really difficult for me as a kid, because I was thinking like, I know the people around me who have experiences, like clair experiences, are not lying. Like, I know that they're good people, but because of the fact that all of us were inside this Christian container within which a lot of these things were considered like stuff that you should keep a distance from, I never figured out how to work with my own intuitive gifts. And so they always intimidated me very much. And I felt intimidated by the fact that I couldn't control them. So like I spent a lot of time, for instance, focusing on schoolwork, because I noticed that when I kept my mind busy, I couldn't like hear things like I might otherwise in moments when I was calm and relaxed. If I kept myself stressed out, then I was too busy to hear my intuitive side. A lot of people do this, I think, without even realizing it. But anyway, the turning point came when I was in my mid-20s, because suddenly I couldn't ignore this kind of stuff anymore. I had been for several years increasingly unhappy. I had spent like 7 years straight in abusive relationships, and then I landed in a PhD program that realistically wasn't aligned with my soul, and so I wasn't happy there either. So it was like this long road of increasing unhappiness, and eventually I had an experience where I was reminded of everything that I had dreamed of and everything that I wanted out of life, and I simultaneously was reminded of the spiritual side of myself that I had been suppressing. And I realized, if I want to be happy and fulfilled, I need to integrate like all of this. I need to integrate the spiritual side and the creative dreams and the travel dreams, and like I have a lot of work to do here. That was, in a nutshell, my quarter-life crisis. And the turning point also involved, there were a lot of crazy synchronicities happening around me and like to me, trying to get my attention. And this was basically the only way that spirit was able to communicate with me at that time, because I had put walls around all of my own psychic senses. So spirit had to like manipulate the physical world in order to get messages through a lot of the time. So anyway, where this led, as I gradually started to embrace my spiritual side, was that I ended up moving to China. And I ended up moving there with this idea that, I could live more cheaply, and as a result of having this opportunity to have like a less stressed out lifestyle, that I could get by on less, I'd have more time for cultivating the dreams that I had, like writing or developing my intuition. And I had it in my head that I was going to go to like Reiki workshops and meditation workshops and maybe healing retreats, and I was going to like firmly establish myself as a spiritual healer type of person. And I also was really excited about the idea of bringing with me my arsenal of crystals and a whole bunch of incense. And I had a Korean friend whose family gave me these little Korean effigies that were supposed to scare off like negative spirits. And I brought these things, all of these things and more with me to China. And I was thinking like, yeah, and I'm gonna have my own apartment that I could decorate with all this stuff where I could burn incense and sage and candles. And basically I envisioned my best life as a new age cliche. And it wasn't that I had grown up seeing the consumer side of it. Like, I think that nowadays a lot of new age stuff is marketed with capitalist intentions, but really I'm a millennial, like an older millennial, born in the mid 80s. So when I was growing up, there wasn't really any of this. Like, there was no influencer lifestyle. It was just me as a little kid who loved my crystals. Like, that was me. Like, that was authentically me without outside influences. But somewhere along the years, I had gotten it into my head that these things were important supports that I needed in order to grow and in order to heal and in order to be safe. So when I got to China, long story short, I ended up very broke very quickly. And so I was living out of like a hostel dorm, not a dorm, I'm sorry. I was living out of a hostel private room for a while. And then I moved in with a friend's parents. And then I moved into a friend's living room and lived on the couch. And then I moved to another friend's living room. And it went like this for a while. But like before, and there were even more moves after that where I still didn't have my own space. But very early in the journey, like I was only there for a couple of weeks, and nothing was going as planned. I didn't have my own space. I was quickly running out of money. I wasn't meeting people that their energy really resonated with mine. And I was kind of internally freaking out because I was like, I came here to grow and I came here to heal. And why is the universe thwarting that? And I laugh now because like I could see the irony of it all. But anyway, I remember like I'd gone to a couple of meetups and the people were saying stuff like how they struggled so much with being kind on a daily basis. And I was thinking like, this doesn't sound very spiritual. Like, okay, yeah, learning to be kind, that's absolutely part of spirituality. But I just like, I kept encountering these situations where I realized like, I thought I was going to find my tribe in these kinds of settings, but like, this is not what I'm dealing with. This is not what I'm here for. I'm not here to just like learn the basics of kindness. And you know, I was encountering people who didn't really seem to have a strong grip on reality. Some of them seemed to have really cool psychic gifts, but their version of spiritual seeking didn't align with mine. Like I had these guys asking me if I was interested in Tantra or telling me how interested they were in Tantra and giving me close hugs. And I had a woman take me out to her balcony to look at the spaceships out on the horizon. And because she'd been channeling messages from like the aliens. And I was thinking like, yeah, this is not what I came here for. And there were more low-key activities where people were doing stuff like, you know, just meditating, but I didn't have money for that anymore. So simultaneously, I didn't even have a space of my own. So I wanted to work with my crystals and my incense and my candles and my sage and my rattles. And I wanted to put up my Korean effigies that scared away the spirits that I wouldn't want. And I couldn't do this. Like, I didn't have a space of my own. I was in other people's homes. And I couldn't be making noise like, you know, banging drums or shaking rattles. And like, I mean, I could have maybe, and maybe one would argue like, well, but you needed to do that in order to really come into yourself. And I would simply counter, I was in other people's homes. I needed to allow them to remain comfortable in their homes. If they have this girl shaking shit and, you know, like making noise and burning stuff in the spare room, that's like, no, I wasn't gonna do that. I wanted to be considerate. But I was really angry. I was angry at the universe because I was like, I came here to have my own space and do these things, and how can I grow without them? And by chance, which I'm sure was not a coincidence in the eyes of the universe, I happened to read a book at that time. I can't remember exactly which book it was. And I read this anecdote that really made me think. And it really made me realize, like, maybe there's something in this for me. And the anecdote was about this shaman in the Andes who would travel from place to place without any tools. When he worked, he did use tools. He would use rocks and stuff, and I don't know what else. But he would travel from place to place without them. And then when he got there, he would find the tools that he would use on site. Like, he would look for tools. And his explanation was that, I can't remember it exactly, but the idea regarding why he did this was essentially that the shaman's gift doesn't derive from specific physical objects. The shaman's gift derives from spirit, and therefore the shaman doesn't need to be like hanging on to specific accessories in order to be a shaman, in order to do the shamanism. And I was like, huh, yeah, okay. So maybe it would not be bad for me to become less attached to the material accoutrement of spirituality. And maybe I'm learning this right now. And the answer actually is, yes, I was learning that right now. But you know, when you're at the beginning of a lesson, you're like, I'm not sure, is this what I'm supposed to be getting from it? Perhaps. Let me live through it and figure it out. Yes, the answer is yes. Spoiler, yes, I was supposed to be learning this. And even still, like at the beginning of realizing maybe I was supposed to learn that, I was still frustrated because I still felt like I wanted, you know, I wanted these objects. I felt safer if I had these objects. And I had a lot of anxiety, and like I was just going through so much. My life was in total upheaval and nothing was going according to plan. So I had lots of anxiety, and I would ruminate on the anxiety, like obsessive compulsive style. And also, like, in tandem with these obsessive compulsive types of anxieties, I had like these chronic fears of like, but I need to cleanse myself and I need to unload the negative energy into something else. And like, you know, I don't know how much you know about obsessive compulsive disorder, but like the idea of cleanliness is a big part of it for some people, like pollution and cleanliness. So like for me, it wasn't, okay, I have to wash my hands and now I have to wash my hands again and now I have to wash my hands again. I have been in that mental space sometimes. But instead, when it came to spiritual stuff, it was more like, I have to cleanse this tarot deck. I think I have to cleanse it more. Maybe that didn't work. I have to cleanse it again. Or, oh, I just came from this really weird Reiki share where this guy was telling me stuff that unsettled me. I need to cleanse my aura, and I need to cleanse it again. Now I need to do something else to cleanse it. Now I need to go somewhere, like, and take a walk to cleanse it in the sun. Like, I was constantly reaching for things and rituals in my mind when I didn't have the space to like arrange the things, and I didn't have like the space, figuratively or literally, to be doing the rituals. And long story short, I eventually basically came to peace with not having these things, not having the crystals on hand, or being able to burn the incense or the sage or the candles, or have the like salt scrubs in the shower, or I don't know, have an altar cloth, or go to the healing events, go to the retreats and get the certifications and the qualifications, and hang out with the spiritual people. I really couldn't afford to do that stuff. And I didn't have the space to do that stuff. And I made my peace with that. And for a while, I looked at it like, I'm just biding my time, and eventually the universe is going to let me have those things. But more importantly, and more profoundly, what ended up happening was that by holding those things out, away from me for so long, the universe helped me realize I didn't actually need them. Not because I'm special and so advanced, but because nobody actually needs any specific thing or any specific ritual. And I say this because what I was finding was that the majority of my healing, like I actually underwent profound healing when I was there. And I experienced like magical things, things beyond the ordinary, things that a non-spiritual person would say don't happen. You know, like for instance, I kept meeting people from another lifetime and recognizing them. And it was like I could see through a veil. And the things that I was learning about this other life and about my soulmates and about karma were so profoundly like uplifting for me and healing. And they helped me see my issues from like this long game perspective, and they helped me to build my confidence and my self-worth and my self-love again so that I could get rid of that stuff that I didn't need anymore. And as all of this was happening, I was like, I didn't need any specific object for this. I didn't need any specific ritual for this. I just needed to be living my life with an open heart and a contemplative mind. And it's just been happening, like, naturally. And what occurred to me is like, this whole world is a playground for spirit. This world is inside of the spirit world. Like, we're in the spirit world all the time. And we're here because our souls decided to come here to have certain experiences. But like, how to put this? The wisdom of the divine energy, of the divine love that has sent us here, or I should say, allowed us to experience being on this plane. That wisdom is so much bigger than our human selves, and it knows exactly how to design our life experiences and connect us with the right people and connect us with the right ideas so that our souls can evolve in the way that they intend to. And it doesn't matter if you don't happen to have, you know, like, I don't know, a rose quartz. Like, it's okay. Or, you know, you want to figure out what happened in your past lives, but you just don't have a labradorite crystal on hand. You can figure it out. If you're meant to figure it out, it'll happen anyway, whether you have the labradorite or not. And, you know, if you feel like this cloud of negative energy around you, well, what is the most potent way to dispel that? Love. Focusing on love. Raising your vibe to genuine, unconditional, cosmic love. So these were all the things that I was learning. And eventually, I came to a point where I was actually happy that I hadn't had the chance to clutter my life with all of these things that I thought I was going there to decorate an apartment with. And I was grateful that I was put into the orbit of the soulmates that I met instead of the soulmates that I was hoping I would find, the conventionally spiritual types that I didn't find. I was happy that I didn't, you know, connect with them because I quite liked the soulmates that I was introduced to even more. And they did so much for my healing and so much for my growth. And so at the end of the day, when my experience in China wrapped up, I had a very different relationship with like spiritual accessories and the idea of retreats and healers and teachers and so on than I had had before. And the idea was basically this: you will have whatever you really need to have in any given moment. If you don't have it, it's because you don't need it. The universe can bring you, you know, an even better alternative than whatever you had in mind, if what you really need is something or someone or some opportunity. But at the end of the day, these are not things that we necessarily have to hang on to in order to stay on our paths and grow and feel safe. And what else do I want to say about this? This is getting complicated. This is such a big topic. I will add that I'm not saying you shouldn't have these things. I really think, you know, crystals are beautiful and essential oils, smell lovely, going to retreats and healing workshops and so on, when you really connect with the people and there's a harmonious vibe and it all just clicks, like that's really cool. But there's none of that you like actually have to cling to. And if you're going to use an object or have a ritual, it is best when it's something that comes from a place of like, how to put this, not from a space of I need this right now in order to be okay, but more a space of like, this is how I'm honoring my journey, and this is how I'm embracing the love that I feel right now, and this is the shape of like the container that I want to make for this intention. Like that is very much more powerful than just like clinging to something or pursuing something because you think you're supposed to. None of this is to knock anybody's spiritual practice. I respect where anyone is. I can relate if you're still in a space of feeling like you need something to cling to in order to feel better. I have been there. And you know what? Sometimes if that's really what you need in a given experience, and that helps you to like stabilize and continue to be kind to yourself, then that's awesome. All I'm saying is that as you grow, you may find that there's a point where you realize your sense of connection to spirit is bigger than anything you can hold in your physical hands. And, you know, that it supersedes any sort of event you can attend or any particular person you can turn to for their healing or for their guidance. So like, if you're going to hold these things in your life, I would remind you, you can hold them loosely and it will be okay. Like the story of the shaman. The shaman realized like, it's not the things, it's not the physical things themselves. It's not even my home, where I come from, that gives me this gift. I could be in a whole other place, around totally different people, with objects I've never seen before in my life. But the energy still moves, and the healing is still possible. And, you know, the security is still possible, because the love is still there. So that's my story. Thank you for listening. If you can relate, then let me know if you want to talk about it. I'm always curious to hear other people's stories. And yeah, if you liked this, please click like, maybe subscribe, and I will catch you next time.